Whoa, my hair is up in the air. Hi, guys. It's sticking up because it's the. There we go. Hey, guys. Okay, so I just finished my stream about Derick and Jill Dillard about why they left the show. So if you haven't seen it yet, go to my YouTube channel. The link is in the bio, and you can see what he said. It's pretty telling about what happened, how the control was going on, what caused everything, the control within the family. There's a lot going on with this situation. It's kind of like moving in a lot of different parts. So there's been a lot of questions that have come up as well. And so someone had asked about contracts in reality television, and I just wanted to be kind of clear here, and I figured I could just address it here, and I'll post this on YouTube. But typically with reality television, if a show is being produced and it's a family, the production goes through one family member or whoever is negotiating with the network. In this case, it's Jim Bob Duggar. So Jim Bob Duggar is working with the production company, and he's the person that technically owns the rights to the show with the family. Okay, so this is pretty standard. Like Chrisley Knows Best with Todd Chrisley and his family is run and owned by Todd Chrisley. With the Browns, it would be similar. Like Sister Wives would be likely owned through Cody. They actually run it through Brown, like an LLC, Brown's Entertainment. So when the contracts are decided, basically how it works is individuals within the family will sign contracts in order to film. But that doesn't mean they're signing a contract in order to get paid. Payment is typically all figured out in a contract with the person who owns the show. So in this case, it would be Jim Bob. Then that person who's getting negotiating with the network about money, they're the ones that are going to determine the percentages that each of the people will be paid from the pot that is given to them by the network. So if they're going to get say, I don't know, on a show that just starts, they might get anywhere from, they usually get about 10% of the revenue that the show makes. So, when a show typically starts, the family might make $25,000 to $40,000 an episode. But obviously, the longer a show is on air, the more revenue it brings in, which is why you'll see people making more and more money the longer they're on reality TV. So with the way that it was supposedly structured with this group was that the kids were supposed to get a certain percentage. And this is comparable to what I understand from the way was run with the Chrisleys. And the reason I know anything about the Chrisleys is because the payments of the Chrisley family were part of the indictment with the federal case that the prosecutor, the federal government has against Todd Chrisley for fraud. Payments made by him to the kids were a part of the evidence in that case. So we know that they use, a lot of times what they'll do is these families will use a production company, and it'll be into some sort of an LLC, or it'll be an incorporation. The network then sends the money to them as a chunk, and then it's up to the family member who owns that trust or who runs that company to then pay out the people on the show. Now, the individuals on the show still have a contract with the network though. So they just aren't getting paid by the network. They're supposed to be getting paid by the person that controls the pot, which would have been Jim in this case. And what can happen is that whoever controls the pot can decide, you're not going to get paid, you're going to volunteer, you're going to do this, you're going to get percentage. They can decide whether or not the network will even have a contract with someone. So if, say, one of them has a kid, Jim Bob could say, I don't want the network to have a contract with that person because I don't want to have money coming in for that. I don't want to have a budget for that. I don't want that budget to come out of my budget. So, correct. So counting on theoretically should have been a new contract for TLC, but according to Derick, it wasn't. So the contract remained through Jim Bob. and he continues to own the rights of it and owns that contract. And so therefore, the show was supposed to be about them, but Jim Bob wasn't even supposed to be on it. And that's the way it was sold by TLC when this happened in 2015, was that Jim and Michelle would no longer be on the show because there was such a public outcry about what happened and how they covered up what Josh did. Josh was then removed from the show as well. So the public assumed that new contracts meant new show. But Derick has said on Twitter and Instagram that it still remained the same contract under 19 Kids and Counting. So technically all he says that the network did, and these are his statements, was that they just changed the show. They didn't change anything else. Now, the network has typically used the threats of NDAs to protect information of these shows, to protect the rights of these shows. And these reality TV show contracts are notoriously bad for the family, bad for the kids, and in some states, they don't even require the kids to have work permits. There are absolutely no requirements for the children to actually be paid in some states. It's pretty intense. Kids that are on reality TV are not protected under SAG, which is the Screen Actor Guild organization. So any child actor falls under SAG. Reality show kids don't fall under SAG, and so they don't even have to adhere to the requirements of SAG for work, like the amount of work hours, how much education they're getting, their payment, whether or not they have tutors, that kind of stuff. So what happens is the family ends up becoming a family business, and then the family doesn't have to adhere to that, and it's crazy. So then the kids don't get paid, but they're technically still working. Some states don't even require that the kids have work permits, even though they're filming in some of these shows 28 days a week. John Goslin said the last year that he filmed with his family, they filmed 28 days, all 28 days of February. They didn't have a single day off in the month of February. He also, in order to get out of his contract, was sued because he didn't do what TLC wanted, according to his interviews. And then they sued him for breach of contract and then forced him into an NDA where he was not able to talk. Now, I have a source that has told me that something similar happened with the Kate's sister-in-law, Jody. Aunt Jody was apparently supposed to be paid but wasn't paid. And according to this source, when she met with TLC, she asked for her payment of $7,000 or $8,000, and TLC said to her, we'll pay you if you sign the NDA. She refused to sign the NDA, so she was actually never paid. Now, the thing is that when you go into these reality shows, they are so crappy in terms of the way that these contracts are structured. The production is not responsible if they witness any crimes, if they are privy to any abuse. They will not testify if they see a child in a situation that's abusive. They fall under this really weird loophole where they're considered documentaries, and so they are just not even a witness to things. They're just sort of existing on the outside, and they're not required by law to report anything to anyone, and you can't subpoena them to testify in court. It's crazy, which is why you don't see MTV testifying at all in these teen mom cases, even though they're witnessing these abusive things happening. This is the biggest problem in reality television right now, is that the kids have absolutely no protection, and bad actors, the parents, can decide whether or not the kids are paid. Now, we know in the case of the Goslin kids that they had trust funds set up, so Kate did pay a percentage and had trust funds set up for each one of the kids so that all of their college would be paid for. But in the case with the Duggars, they're saying, we weren't paid, none of the kids were paid, Amy wasn't paid, I wasn't paid. And then for Amy, even though she did have a special, so she was under contract for the special she did with TLC, and she also had a contract for filming. In order to get out of that contract and to walk away, because if you don't walk away from the contract, the production company actually owns your rights to your story and owns the rights to your life. So if something happens in your life, they have a right to film it, they have a right to put it out, they have a right to edit it in any way that they want. They can put like you don't own your life anymore. So you're basically saying you can pay me $50,000 and I'm giving you the rights to my entire life. So for someone like Amy, she likely went to the network and said, I don't want to be a part of this. It probably happened after everything happened with Josh Duggar. I am speculating here. I don't know this for a fact, but I can assume it has to do with that time because she wasn't on the show much after that happened, and she can't speak out now because of the NDA, and Derick says that Amy was never paid. So with that being said, these networks will say, you can get out of this contract as long as you don't talk about anyone. And so apparently this NDA that Amy has prohibits her from saying anything about anyone. And she basically, according to an article that was written on Radar Online in 2018, a source told Radar that she was forced to delete all of her photos of the Duggars. She can't talk about the Duggars. She can't even act like they exist. Think about that. She can't even talk about her life, even though they're her relatives, because of this NDA. Which, by the way, according to Derick, she was never paid, period. So it's a mess. So unless you get out of these contracts, anything that happens in your life, they have a right to film. They can show up at your house. They can tell you this is that. So this is another issue with Andrew Glennon. Andrew Glennon is technically under contract. So here's what happened with his filming. They were filming in Indiana during that period of time, they decided that they were going to show up at Andrew's house. Mind you, Andrew says that they had never reached out to him before that day and had never asked for his side of the story until they were driving over to his house, showing up. They were mic'd. He had no idea. He said that they told him, we can film you because we have a contract and you're on contract. And he said that he knew he was quitting. He already had quit, but he knew because of what happened to him and what happened given the way that they were spinning the story with Amber, that because Amber had left the home and she was the one with making the primary amount of money, estimated around $50,000 an episode, that he then is the sole provider for James. And it almost felt like it was his sort of, if you're going to drag me through the mud, if you're going to paint me as this asshole, if you're going to paint me as the villain, if you're going to make me be the bad guy, even though she's the one that arrested, you better pay me. And he knew that they were going to say no because he knows that the contract is with Amber, not with him. And they don't care about his story because MTV cares about Amber's story, not his. And so when they said no in the way that he presented it, he knew that it was done. And so since then, this is why James is not allowed to film. He has said repeatedly that he does not want MTV to be able to use his son as a storyline for a scripted show that doesn't even talk about reality. MTV and these reality shows, they paint and piece together stories. So when you're watching a show, you just have to understand this is not true. It's not real. This is whatever the network edits it. The timelines are all fabricated. They manipulate storylines. They ask people to talk about certain things. They push the kids. Kale Lowry, for instance, has said repeatedly that the production has done things to manipulate her children. For instance, they wanted to get Isaac to do something, and they wanted to get a reaction out of him to get upset. And so she said on one of her podcasts that they pushed Isaac to the point of tears in order to get the story that they wanted. Also, the issue here is that any time that any single one of them walks and speaks out about the network, then they are in breach of contract. So basically, they are held hostage to these ridiculous contracts where they say, if we witness abuse, we don't have to say anything. If your kids get abused and we see it, we don't have to say anything. If you get killed, it's not our fault. These kids, they also, by the way, are not employees of these networks. So they don't get benefits. They don't have paychecks. They are 1099 by the network. They don't have 401ks. They don't have, health insurance, nothing. They're also bound to these crazy NDAs where they can't speak anything. And if they do, they're threatened with like these $500,000 to $1 million lawsuits. It's crazy. If they quit, they're in breach of contract. So they either have to like get fired. And yes, a lot of them do have tax issues because of the way that they're paid. So they don't take taxes out when you're 1099. So for instance, me, I'm on YouTube. Every month I get a check from Google for AdSense. And it's always, it's a large check. And then I have to determine based on my, when you are a contractor, like the girls, they're actually considered self-employed. So you have to estimate 15% of that gross money has to be paid for a self-employment tax, which covers like your FICA and your Social Security. And then you also have to like estimate your state and federal taxes. And then if you don't pay like every single quarter, you can get penalized with penalized with a penalty fee by the IRS. So it's crazy. Like for instance, I have my YouTube channel. I'm not an employee of YouTube. I am a contractor. I have my own business, just like these girls are basically like their own businesses. And any of the families are. Which then theoretically puts whoever has the contract with the network in a very unreasonable power position with their families. So, it's just like the girls, they can have on Teen Mom, they might have another child, which then will negotiate and they'll say, well, my budget is increased because I have another kid. You have more for your storyline, so you need to pay me more money. Or, that's how they can kind of negotiate additional revenue coming in. Yeah, you have to have like workers' compensation if you have employees. Now, if you don't have an employee, like if you don't have employees, you don't have to carry workers' comp. So I don't have to carry workers' comp because I don't have any employees. But if I did have employees, I would have to carry workers' comp. And then they just get sucked in because every single contract, they get more and more money. And the contracts can run for a year, 5 years, 10 years. And then the network can say, well, we own the rights of this for life. So your wedding that we filmed is ours. It's not yours. We own it. It's crazy. There's just nothing, the way that the laws were structured for film and for like actors never took into account reality TV at all. John's NDA was 10 years. So I don't know the typical NDA time frame. But John's with TLC was 10 years. Then there's issues too with the NDAs and with all of that. NDAs don't typically hold up in court at all. So for many of these people, the network is just putting these people in a position where they can be like, hey, we're going to sue you if you say these things. But then if they actually get to the lawsuit part, the court could like completely dismiss it, but it wouldn't matter because that person would still have to spend and put up front all the money for attorney's fees. They'd have to take time from work. It's just a pain in the ass. Think of it this way. Kale and Lindsay Chrisley they're currently in like this legal battle right now with their podcast network. They haven't at all like recorded since December. And it sounds like this might end up going into a lawsuit in federal court. And if that's the case, like they haven't worked for 4 months. And because they're a contractor, they haven't made any income at all in 4 months. So any money that they had a part of their contract with Wave, they haven't made. And so it's you don't have salary. You're only getting paid based on what you're producing. So a lot of these people just stay in these crappy contracts because if they try to fight back, they're going to lose income, they're going to lose time, they're going to lose everything. So, yes. Also, with a lot of these contracts, if the family member who owns the contract, like Jim Bob or Todd Chrisley or Cody Brown or whoever, if they decide that, they can give leeway too. So say TLC isn't watching everything Amy Duggar King says, right? So TLC probably isn't paying attention. But if Jim Bob or one of his people are paying attention to what Amy says, he can then enforce that NDA by contacting the network. It's crazy. And that's just based on my understanding of how these NDAs work. You can break NDAs if they're hiding illegal crimes. You can break NDAs. NDAs as a whole typically don't hold up in court because you cannot take away someone's freedom of speech. You cannot take away someone's ability to talk about and speak about their own lives. And the problem with the NDAs with these reality shows is that when you have an NDA, you can't talk about your life. It's crazy. Imagine that. We own your life. NDAs just as a whole don't hold up. So that is the scoop with these reality show NDAs and all of that, and why this makes sense. And someone had said, well, why didn't you reach out to the Duggars? First off, the Duggars don't respond to anyone if you ever reach out to them and ask them. I have left them comments on their social media questions. They never respond. They typically don't respond to the media. If you remember in November, they responded about the stuff related to Josh Duggar, and they said, we don't typically respond. They are notoriously tight-lipped and very controlled with what they say. TLC as a whole just does not comment. Same with like MTV. Did you see MTV comment one time with the stuff that came down the pipe with Amber? Never. They didn't say a damn thing about her arrest. They didn't make a statement as a network, nothing. Because to them, they don't care. To them, any publicity is good publicity for these shows. So I don't have anything else right now, but that's what I wanted to clear up. I'm going to save this here and I'm going to upload this on YouTube. If you haven't yet checked out my video about Derick, just check it out. The link is in the bio. And there was also a video yesterday about Jazz, where he talked about, clarified some of his statements about her. And that's where we're at right now. I will eventually be getting back to my regular content. Some of you guys have asked if I'm going to do Mama June from Not to Hot. You guys, it was so bad. I watched the first episode. It's so terrible. It's so scripted. It's not even real. Honey Boo Boo is literally acting. You can tell that she's acting in every single scene. There is nothing real about that show. They might be rehashing things that have happened, but I really don't, there's no reality in that show at all. So I don't know that I can actually do recaps of it unless there's like something that actually is like tangible to what happened in real life. It's just, it was so bad. I couldn't even watch it. Last season wasn't as bad as this. So, all right, you guys, I will be back later tonight, maybe. Thank you guys. Make sure that you tune in on YouTube, and I'll be back. Bye.